Hi, everybody. Good late morning. My name is Perrin, and I'll be the moderator for this session. And very happy to have an esteemed group of panelists, which I'll invite right up to the stage now, starting with John Dickinson. He's VP of Engineering with Spectrum Enterprise, so come on up. We also have Eyal Aloni. He's head of service provider line of business with RAD. Come on up. And Aloke Tusnial, he's CTO for NFE and SDN with NEC Netcracker. And last but not least, we have Rick Mashburn. He's Director of Systems Engineering with Fortinet. And yeah, all right, so we all get a seat, good. I'll head down here and...
Oh, he took your seat.
Huh, that's all right. So yeah, I have a couple slides. In terms of just brief introduction, for those who don't know, we, in conjunction with MEF, did a survey of network operators, 111 globally, and on the topic of SD-WAN, it's the most thorough survey we've done of operators on SD-WAN in our history, one of our more thorough surveys ever, actually. Over 50 questions on a number of topics. It was co-sponsored, MEF as the organization partner, but 128 Technology, Ariaka, InfoVista, Nuage Networks, and Versa Networks. So they were the sponsors. The benefit of a sponsored project like this is the data is available for free. There's printout copies here at the event. If you see them, I encourage you to grab one. All the data is in it, and it's also available online. You can find it, I think, at the Light Reading website. If not now, then quite soon. And also through the sponsors, you can get copies. But there's a lot of great data in there. I'm only going to just hit on a couple of pieces throughout the next 40 minutes, which is going to be primarily discussion. But I just wanted to share a couple of highlights here. And some of them will just provide some talking points as we go through the discussion. So this one I wanted to start with. We asked the operators, and this was a global survey, which percentage of your company's overall enterprise WAN revenue do you think SD-WAN will account for in the following time periods we gave them? Not surprisingly, very little is deployed today. We'll get into that on the panel as to why service providers haven't deployed much so far. But the expectations are pretty tremendous, and maybe we can talk through this as we go through. But majority expecting SD-WAN to contribute up to 1/3 of their enterprise revenue by year 3 of their deployments, and nearly 1/3 see more than 50%. These are massive billions of dollars just in the North America market alone, never mind globally. So the expectations are high. These are expectations, not fact, and we can talk about why they may or may not come to fruition. And one of the biggest, I think, issues to resolve for any of those expectations to come anywhere near fruition, I think, is this one. So we put it first. So the focus of this panel is on universal CPE as it relates to SD-WAN. So as you'll see as we go through, there's some discussion you can have of universal CPE by itself, there's discussion of SD-WAN by itself, and then there's the combination, which is primarily the focus here. So for our panelists, how does the uCPE business model work for a network operator? And if it doesn't work, what is needed to fix it? Maybe Eyal, we'll let you kick it off and just discuss it from there.
Okay, thank you for this question. I think it's the most important questions in the industry today when a lot of service providers are still struggling to build up the business case for the UCP. You know, at the end of the day, when you compare an existing appliance today, just like a firewall or a router, to a virtualized platform, actually, the business case doesn't fly. You need to add an x86 platform, which costs money. You need to have a middleware that allows to host the VNFs, which cost money. And then you need to pay licenses for the VNFs by themselves, which also cost money. So in many cases, you know, just a simple router and a simple appliance located at the customer premise is actually cost less than a comprehensive UCP. But I think that's not the right comparisons to make. I think the fact that the uCPE will allow to virtualize not only just the firewall and the router, which is basic, or to virtualize the SD-WAN, which actually provide the connectivity. But at the end of the day, this platform of a uCPE located at the customer premise. Although, virtual CPE in general also allow virtualization at the data centers, but uCPE specifically, when it's located at the customer premise, allow to generate new revenue streams from launching new services. And that's at the end of the day, is the maturity, or I would say it's the goals of the uCPE. And I can give you some new examples that of new services that the service provider can actually launch. And most of the telecom service providers do not in this area. Obviously, to provide networking function, this is trivial. And they are doing it today with appliances. They might virtualize it in the future. That's trivial. Adding security to that, it's also trivial. To add a firewall, UTM, and so on and so forth, it's actually the combination. Adding SD-WAN to that, it's all about connectivity and security. But if you come to think about it, when you have networking, you have security, and suddenly you can add IT into that, that's a completely new world that the telecom service provider are not in and do not play in this market. And think about new services from the IT that can run on top of this uCPE and can bring completely new services to this market and generate new revenues from those services. And for example, if you go to the retail market today, usually in the retail market, in a retail store, you have a router. You might have a firewall if you need an internet breakout, and that's it. If you come to think about it, if you virtualize, for example, the point of sale, and the service provider, the telecom service provider, suddenly will offer a managed point of sale as a service, or a DVR, and you can actually control the surveillance camera within a gas stations or a retail store within applications that allow to detect violence in a gas stations and provide violence detection as a service. These are completely new services that the telecom service providers can offer and generate more money. And if you come to think about it, if you just count the number of cores that you need for an SD-WAN or a firewall and so on and so forth, and compare it to the cost of appliances, it will never fly. From my perspective, the cost of the uCPE should be as expensive as possible. It's completely contradict to what many people think in the industry, right? Because it brings flexibility, because it brings more agility to launch new services.
All right, let's use that as a starting point. Yeah, because it's an interesting comment. And we'll bring in John last, but I'll let all the vendors speak first.
So I have a little different view, right? Okay. I believe in uCPE. I believe uCPE is the direction to go. But if you don't mind, I want to give a little background. So as probably you would realize looking at me, I'm originally from India. And back in India, about 300 years ago, there was a king called Muhammad bin Tughlaq. Right? I'll tell you where I'm going with this. So we used to call him, anyway, it's a Hindi term, I'll leave that around. But he had some great ideas. 300 years ago, he came up with the concept of paper money. This was a time when everybody was using gold coins as the way to transact and trade. And his point was, guys, gold is the wrong currency. You should be using paper money as your currency. People laughed at him. Who will ever use paper currency, right? That is stupid. There's no way that you can use paper currency for transactions. 300 years later, or probably less, today everybody uses paper currency. The challenge that he had was, he did come with the idea, he actually implemented the idea, but he didn't have the right channels, the right methodologies, the right opportunities of defining how do you not duplicate paper. So when he came up with the concept of paper currency, the country was flooded with fake currency, right? I see a very similar thing with uCPE. I totally agree with you that uCPE, when you take it to the market, there is an opportunity to bring in a lot new services on top of it. Mm-hmm. Problem is that today we don't have two issues. Number one, today we don't have the services that we can put on top of it when it comes to defining what services you put on it from an IT perspective. Second is the people who are selling SD-WAN, right? The service providers, and John, hopefully you'll corroborate on that, but people who are selling SD-WAN, they're selling it just like they sell network services. So the sales team that are going in and selling, they've never sold IT services. They've never sold a point of sale system to a retail shop. So for them, when they go and sell SD-WAN, it's very similar to them selling MPLS connectivity and selling a firewall to that customer. So there is a mismatch between what we're trying to create and what we're trying to sell. And that is hurting the adoption of SD-WAN. So I think it's a matter of what we would call crawl, walk, and run. I totally agree with you that that's where we need to be, right? So when we are running, that's where we need to be. We need to have a UCPE that can actually bring everything together. But if we start crawling with that, then we're going to stifle the economy, and we'll get to what Mohammed bin Tighlaq was trying to do 300 years ago. That would be my view on that.
All right, interesting point. Rick, if you want to make some comments, and then we'll have John keep everybody honest.
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, everyone. I tend to have some of the same thoughts and complexities, and oftentimes in conversations about how to make this a reality. Of course, my focus at Fortinet is the security part of it. But the interoperability becomes an issue, the number of resources, number of CPUs, virtual CPUs assigned to each VNF, and then how many more can you add to it. I think the disruptors will continue to come with this market, especially as we start to containerize services that can be, or as you have a controller maybe like tying into Kubernetes to steer. So where the footprint or impact of resources as you add services can become less than what you would typically see today as you add in, maybe some new violence capability software within the box. But I don't think we're going to see this go away. I think it's here to stay for sure. I think uCPE is a promise of less truck rolls, less people on the street to be able to roll out services. For me, if I own a company, to be able to take an idea and launch it today versus 6 months from now, it's very compelling. But then there are the complexities and the knowledge around being able to do that.
Right, so there's a kind of combination, there's a cost issue, there's I guess kind of the sales process, how things are sold, there's interoperability, complexity. John, maybe bring you in at this point, maybe set from Spectrum's, strategically where uCPE fits in, and these challenges that have been listed, are they solvable, and what would be your recommendations for the industry?
Thanks, Sterling. Yeah, so from a Spectrum point of view, we are big believers in the cloud and putting as many applications in the cloud. For those of you in the audience who have deployed uCPE, you all know that they are both expensive and complex devices, basically a mini computer running at the customer prem. That's not a easy thing to manage when there's hundreds of thousands of those out there. So we look at it from the perspective of what makes the most business sense. And you look at the applications such as the Fortinet firewall, UTM, some of the other DPI, high compute applications. Those might not necessarily belong on the uCPE, and they're probably better suited in the cloud where you can throw dynamic compute at it versus trying to put out a 16 or 24 core CPE and strand that capital for that customer in hopes that they're going to upgrade and add those future services. So from a Spectrum Enterprise perspective, we think investing today in the cloud is a more prudent business approach in serving those services. Again, I agree with all the panelists here that it's all about service agility and faster time to market and getting those new services out as a telecommunications provider. However, the applications can run in the cloud as well as on uCPE. So I think you have to be selective on what you're going to run on that uCPE and not try to go out and put out this high-end box in hopes that you will utilize those services. Because again, that's stranded capital and stranded compute that you can't share with other customers. And so if you have that compute in the cloud, you can utilize that CPU over and over again for multiple customers versus pinning that up in a single customer. And I think where the vendors can help with this is they can open up the environment on the ecosystem and the uCPE and separate the software from the hardware, giving us a common operating system that we can deploy and manage onboard VNFs once and not have to do that over and over again for each ecosystem that we deploy. I think some of the other advantages are the DPDK acceleration, utilizing that in every application. So we can get the most out of that UCPE hardware, and that we're not having to put out large amount of compute, and we can run thin client applications or VNFs on that UCPE and really minimize that cost that we put out there.
Do you, just to kind of cap this one off, and then we'll go to the next topic, but I did want to spend a fair amount, as we all agreed this is a big one. Is UCPE for Spectrum, is it necessary ultimately? I know you talked about the cloud, but is there a future where you just say everything's solved by the cloud for SD-WAN specifically, and maybe if anyone else wants to make a closing comment on that?
Sure.
Certainly. So it does play into our overall strategy on where these services live. We can move them to the UCPE, or we can have them reside in the cloud. It really is, it can be a customer selection-driven decision, or it can be a business decision on our part on where we run these applications. And coming to the table with a universal CPE that can run different VNFs is an advantage, I think, for SD-WAN clients. And so as we get into a multi-SD-WAN environment where the SD-WAN is now just a client application and no longer a bundled hardware software, I think that's an advantage for us as an operator.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else want to make any final comment, and then we'll switch to the next
if I may. So the way I look at it is the ultimate environment would be a mix of our hybrid of cloud and or centralized and decentralized environment, right? Where you have certain VNFs that would be centralized, that would be on the cloud. There will be still others that would be decentralized and would fit well onto the CPE.
Yes.
Right? Now, how you define that CPE and how you define what goes in there, that depends on, number one, the kind of the network function or the kind of the function. And IT I don't want to limit it to network functions, right? It could be network or IT functions. And more important is it is actually dependent on the customer themselves and the segment of the customers. There are enterprises that will swear that they want everything on the prem. And there are small, medium businesses who don't really care how you do it, and you can actually define where you want it and how you want it. So from a service provider community perspective, and John, keep me honest here, but from a service provider community perspective, it's actually, you are to a certain point dependent on your customers and what the customers are looking at. There's areas that you can influence the customers. There are areas where the customers influence you. And a hybrid approach would be the right approach to go. Having said that, I come back to my previous point on the CPE itself. Do you really need a universal CPE that can do all for everyone? Or do you need a commodity box that can put some specific VNFs and allow you to go to market quickly, so depending on the market that you're going after, right? And depending on the segment that you're actually selling to. That's what will define how we move forward with it.
All right, yeah, do you,
If I may, I would like to add, first of all, I fully agree with Aloke on that topic. I think the centralized approach and the decentralized approach are complementary each other. At the end of the day, it's about segmentation of the market. The enterprise will go mainly for the UCPs. And when we classify enterprise, it's mainly business customers that has their own IT department, and they have their IT policy and IT regulations, and they would like to keep control of the applications. And therefore, I believe that in most of the cases, they will go for UCPE. And then there will be the mid-size or low-end business customers like SMBs and so that will centralize and will cloud the virtualization. I think they are both complementary each other, and I fully agree on that. And I think that you mentioned a very important point, that the software should be disaggregated from the hardware. At the end of the day, the hardware should be commercial off-the-shelf servers, should be white boxes, not necessarily x86, but different types of white boxes. And there should be a middleware software that allows to virtualize the application and the services in the most easy way to allow to do the easy integration of pick and choose and trial and error applications. And at the end of the day, that will actually enhance the deployment of virtual CPE in general, whether it's going to be centralized or decentralized.
all right, with that, we'll have to have the last word on that one. We spent a lot of time on that. So there's three big topics to get through. This is the second one, differentiation, and number three will be security, and then we'll see what we have time for after that, but I think these are the three big ones. Maybe, Rick, I'll let you kick this one off. Obviously, differentiation, I set it up in terms of versus do-it-yourself. We may broaden it into even just among operators, but certainly versus do-it-yourself. Fortinet's got a lot of experience in deploying VNS functions for security, so maybe let you kick it off, and then we'll go from there.
Absolutely. I would say for me, having an MSSP background, you always do look for what can you make or what can you offer that's unique. I think SD-WAN in and of itself, just having a simple overlay network with one site seems manageable to people who may not have all the knowledge. But when you start to have multiple sites, and when you start to layer, when you start to talk about decentralizing, computing, maybe putting in the cloud, these are the things that are natural to an MSSP, and they have the teams for them. So for me, it's just a natural ability, if you will, that an MSSP, ISPs, CSPs bring to the table is they've been hiring people for decades to build up to this point. For any individual outside of maybe a large signature customer, enterprise customer, who already has a team, these are not simple things to do in any way. I mean, the overlay, like I was pointing out with one site, maybe having 2 VPNs, yes, those are click options. You could probably make it through, but once you hit that point of what's my criteria, what's impacts if I'm a PCI type customer, what do I take on that's my responsibility? And I don't think most are tooled, nor do they have the workforce to accomplish end-to-end and take on that responsibility. With the number of breaches that we've seen over the years, I feel it's again a natural progression towards an MSSP to say, you're a professional, you have the team, you have the ability, and more importantly, they already have the infrastructure and the ability to move in some cases, not always, to move faster than you possibly could as far as a complete solution versus one site at a time while you build out your team. So I think that's already built in, and that would compel me to go with an MSSP versus do it yourself.
Right.
If you don't mind.
Go ahead.
I see, so I think perception is key, right? It's not so much on whether you want it as managed or you want it as a DIY. It's more the customers want to feel on the enterprise side, both on the SMB and enterprise side, they want to feel that they have control, right? As we've been working with service providers and working with on their behalf with enterprises, we realize that there are customers, both on the SMB side and enterprise side, that are okay to have a managed services and have the operators come in and do it all for them, but they still want to have that perception of control, which means that they want to have the visibility, they want to have, or at least have the feel of control, and therefore feel that, yes, they can, at any given point of time, go and take their destiny in their own hands. Right? So even if they are doing a managed services, unlike in the past, there's more and more ask now of them being able to do self-serve, being able to see at any given point of time what their network's looking like, being able to feel as if they can control it. And especially with SD-WAN, now that you give them the capability of driving applications the way they want, right, and do application-aware routing and manage your security based on applications and make it more sensitive to that, the customers are looking for more control. Whether they execute that control or not is immaterial, right? It's the perception that matters, and ultimately, the more you can show to them that they have control, that they can actually exercise control, the more successful the solution will be, the more successful the policy will be.
Let me bring John in now for the operator view. So, as you look at competition, do you view do-it-yourself as the primary competitor to how Spectrum is rolling out SD-WAN, or is it primarily looking in terms of other operators, and just what are kind of the main bullet points of what would be your top differentiators?
Yeah, so I think we see it as both. I think we see both a competitive landscape, both with the do-it-your or bring your own versus our competitors deploying SD-WAN. So I think it's a multi-pronged competition here. I think we're looking at this. I think integration is another key area that we feel is important for the enterprise and how that gets integrated into their existing services. For example, our SD-WAN hybrid solution allows us to easily add customer sites to an existing ELAN without having to change their network topology. So doing those kinds of integrations for the customers, I think, brings a huge benefit to their existing enterprise without having to completely disrupt and rebuild their whole network with an overlay SD-WAN. So looking at this, I think there's key things we can do as operators to provide that single pane of glass for management of security endpoints from a managed service standpoint, doing that integration, providing them ease of operation. I think as Rick suggested, they don't have the teams in place to do this. We have that expertise to bring to the table to perform that for the customer, and if they want to transition it in-house, they can do that over time. I think we have that flexibility to provide that up front.
All right, let me, and also I'll put up a little bit of survey data, which if you want to comment on that as well, but go ahead, Eyal.
Yeah, I think, first of all, I agree with Aloke, but I also agree with John on that. I think at the end of the day, it's all about business case and the value that the service provider can bring to the table instead of doing it your own. I think if the service provider will take responsibility, and it's different from taking control, take responsibility for the whole service and allow to have a control-wise to the enterprise by providing visibility on the application, providing visibility on the service, and at the end of the day, what are the alternatives? He can do a VPN service today, which costs him a lot, or he can do it his own by having an SD-WAN, or he can get an SD-WAN service, managed service from the service providers, but the service provider providing it in a better price structures, with more visibility about the application, so we bring more values that create stickiness, and at the end of the day, it allows the enterprise customers will focus on his core business and not to do, connectivity. So it's all about value versus business case.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think as a service provider, we can provide that integration of the additional applications, a multi-vendor environment. So if an enterprise goes out and purchases an SD-WAN platform, they get that from a single vendor. They get what the vendor has in terms of features. However, we can integrate other feature functionality beyond just that SD-WAN service and add in a Fortinet firewall or other UTM features that aren't available in that SD-WAN platform. I think an enterprise would have a very challenging time to get that integration done at that customer level with multiple vendors.
So it's interesting, yeah, it's just I wanted to point out the integration of functions and the quicker deployment in our survey among operators is what operators are seeing to differentiate, not just versus do-it-yourself, but also among competitors. Go ahead.
True, one quick one though. I mean, this has given rise to a new set of competitors for service providers. In fact, on Monday, was on a panel with Fujitsu now that is terming themselves as service providers, right? Because they're providing full managed services on SD-WAN. Given that SD-WAN is an over-the-top player, I think from a competition perspective, it's not about just DIY, the enterprise is doing it themselves. Yep. It's giving rise to a brand new set of service providers, if you might, not necessarily communication service providers, but over-the-top service providers, or VARs as we used to call them before, that are starting to play in this space. Right? And that's something. Do you see this, John, as a new set of competition, a new threat coming to you?
Yes, there are another of I would say, non-facility-based providers that are getting into this space, and that is a fear possibly that a Google or an Amazon would want to start to offer services through our networks and offering and relegating us to wholesale. So I think we have to step our game up and get these services out to market, because if we don't, others will.
I thought I had a chart in there, but I don't. But there was a question in the survey about ownership of connectivity. Like you're a network operator, you own a network, and SD-WAN's a over-the-top service. There was a large portion of operators saying that the ownership of the network is a critical piece to how they're differentiating. Basically, I'm wondering for Spectrum and from what you're seeing as a panel, is that, to your point about a Fujitsu type of managed service provider that doesn't own a network, should operators that own network be pushing the network connectivity ownership as a key value proposition in SD-WAN, or is that going to backfire and just carry? I mean, there's obviously a temptation. You own a network, it's something you've got.
Yeah, again, I think that's where the Spectrum hybrid SD-WAN is a strong play in the market, where We can keep that transport as a service to our existing customers while extending their reach with SD-WAN and integrating that seamlessly. I think that's where an over-the-top provider has a harder time in doing that, and so integrating to their existing network.
Yeah. So, and this is playing out, I mean, this has played out so many times before. I think connectivity is not going to be the differentiator because, like John said, once the Googles and the Amazons and the others come in, they will start saying, okay, you provide connectivity, you are become a wholesale player. What will really make the difference is the experience. Ultimately, in this particular space, and this is still a very nascent space, and what is really going to differentiate for the enterprises, for the SMBs, is the ease of use, the experience that they're getting, how simple it can get and how quickly can they get to do the day-to-day tasks. Ultimately, whether it's connectivity, whether it's security, whether it's acceleration of the WAN, all of these are not necessarily what the enterprises are trying to do. This is what is facilitating them to do what they want to do, right? This is not their basic task. And if this can become almost transparent to them, where they can actually go and do the job that they're supposed to be doing and focus on their business, then whoever is able to make this transparent to them is the entity that's going to win. So, whether it's the people who are providing the connectivity or it's the over-the-top players that come in and say, we will simplify this for you.
So do the panelists all agree then that pushing the network connectivity as a value for a network operator is a bad idea? Is it generally stay away from that, or?
I don't think so.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
I think you own the customer already.
Right.
In Spectrum's case, you have customers. You have a customer base. You have a market that you can already go to, and I'm sure you are. So I see it that it's a it depends answer.
Yeah.
As is with most things in life. But yeah, you already own the customer. Why not? Why not go and put your best foot forward? You know us. You know your connectivity. You know our support already. Look what more we can do for you. And yes, we're agnostic. Yes, you don't have to buy all your circuits from us. But we can manage all of them for you.
Right, and the results were dead evenly mixed. I don't think this has been resolved. I'm curious how it plays out.
So, I mean, you can go ahead. So you mentioned that you own the customer. We actually had a similar survey, or I looked at a similar survey. I believe it was survey was conducted by Light Reading a while back, and we looked at the spending of an enterprise. Right, if you look at where the enterprises spend. You'll be surprised how much they spend with the telcos, right? It's less than 10 to 12%. Right. 80+% of their spend is actually outside of the telcos. It's with the VARs, with the IT systems, with the rest of the world. So there's a lot that the telcos can go get it, but the ultimate, I would say, decision making would be, can the telcos make it transparent? And yes, if you can make it transparent, if you can make it easy for them to consume, they will come to you. Otherwise, the 10% that they're spending with you is continue to go down, right? Because the amount of money that the enterprises and the SMBs want to spend on connectivity is commodity for them, right? And the pressure is always downwards. And it's about being able to spend on stuff that will allow them to do their business today. Right, and that's what would be the differentiator. All
right, we've got we have a couple of topics, but I wanted to hit the security one as the last of the big three. So let's move to that. We have about 10 minutes left. So security, we'll let Fortinet kick this one off as the security vendor on the panel, but of course everybody can weigh in. But just just set the stage for the importance and role of security in a software-defined WAN.
Absolutely. Can I have another hour?
In less than 10 minutes.
Yeah,
actually, probably less than probably 3 minutes because we got to get everybody in.
For my friends. Yes, I know I've been in a few conversations where the first step is, well, excuse me, SD-WAN already has security because we have the overlay network. And that is true to a point. I always look at security as if there are places where I can put another security piece, the functionality that's better suited in certain places versus focusing on one area, then I would prefer to do that. Also, when I look at a VPN, I do view it as a tunnel. I said this recently at a different conference where if you look at the tunnel between England and France, each of them have their own soldiers and customs at each end of the tunnel. And there's a reason for that is because the tunnel doesn't protect you by itself. So I feel very strongly that as you are deploying that every asset that you have is vulnerable. Even us at layer 8, we are vulnerable. We may ignore things that we're told as warnings on our screens, but we continue to do so. So for me, whether you go into the cloud with computing or you move the resources to the premise, the impact must be known, and it is not because one area is secure does not by default mean that all of it is secure. So I feel very strongly that you need security in multiple places, and you need to know where you're vulnerable. And no matter how we implement, if you cease to watch, you will become the target, because we all are. We're constantly the target. So I don't feel that SD-WAN in and of itself is secure, but I do like that it has a piece of security that's very important, that between your head end and your gateways and your CPE devices, you have comfortability there, but who are you letting in and out of your tunnel? Layer 8 users within your sites, what are they accessing? Knowledge is power, visibility is power, and ultimately reacting to those, hopefully in zero-day capabilities is the goal.
Maybe for John, I'd be curious, as you talk to customers about SD-WAN, the security topic I'm sure comes up, if not first, in the top 2. What is the initial kind of feedback from enterprises on security around SD-WAN? More secure, less secure, they don't understand it, or asking you a lot of questions?
Yes, it's an excellent question, and it really is top priority, top on their minds as far as the security, not just of the SD-WAN itself, but also what value add security can we add on top of the SD-WAN. And I think that's where, as a managed service, we have a very valuable offering there as far as UTM and a full suite of security services which can be added and integrated in the SD-WAN to provide that level of security, and also provide them a single pane of glass to look at all the security endpoints and integrate that with SD-WAN, because SD-WAN in itself, as Rick said, is secure, but there's a lot of additional security you can layer on top of that and integrate for the customer's data, just beyond the secure tunnels. There's a lot of endpoints, there's a lot of internet connections in places where there could be a security breach, and I think that's where we can provide the managed service to close those gaps.
Right. So I agree with John here, right? But the way I see this, John, is again, it's about the customer segment, right? So when you go to the enterprises would say, SD-WAN is fine, it's a separate discussion, it's a smarter way of connectivity, but let's talk security differently, and don't mess with my security just because you want to change some connectivity and put SD-WAN on top of that. So security is a separate topic, and I want to focus on that because I don't want you to mess with my security. On the other hand, if you go to an SMB, their expectation is, especially on the smaller side, the expectation is, you're giving me an SD-WAN, it better be secured, right? That is what I'm expecting. It should be already in there. I don't need to worry about it. I don't need to be thinking about it because I'm buying this from you. I'm not buying it from somebody else or doing it myself, so it should be secured. And that's how I see a different approach for different segments of customers when it comes to security.
Interesting point. Yeah, go ahead.
I think, there is a consensus here in the panel that security is important, and
Sure.
that's for sure. We need to bear in mind the objective of SD-WAN. The objective of SD-WAN for one of the main objectives of the SD-WAN is to replace the existing services based on IPVPN, which is by definition is a secure service. And when you go and take the connectivity of IPVPN over the top and over the internet, and you split the traffic between existing VPNs based on IPMPLS and over the top, whether or over cellular connections, it must be secure. And you need to get it has to be, you need to provide the quality of experience to the customer that you provide him a secure service. So security is, I would say, a major part in the SD-WAN. And at the end of the day, it's all about connectivity. And connectivity, a secured connectivity, it's a part, it's a trivial things that whatever SMB or enterprise customers are, they would like to get it, and they consider it as a trivial question. Of course, the security divisions within the enterprise, they would like to verify that the service provider takes the correction points and the corrective actions to make the connection as secure as possible.
All right, good. Yeah, and I just put up some survey data from the survey, which I think maybe reinforces your point a bit. Maybe some segmentation is needed, certain customers, just because this was evenly split. I mean, you couldn't really get more even of preferred models. So I think probably the segmentation is going to be pretty critical going down the road. So any last thoughts on security? We can get through one more topic, I think. We've got about 4 minutes. Well, all right, let's hit, I'd like, maybe do this one since it's a MEF event. We'll close out on the interoperability issue for uCPE. You want to?
Yeah. I think, you know, uCPE, when you look on uCPE, there are various components within the uCPE. And each one of them has its own interoperability issue that needs to be covered and needs to be addressed. In general, when you analyze UCP architecture, you have the underlay, the functions that deals with the connectivity, with the routing functionality, and with the access to the service from the UNI ports and from the NNI ports, and so on. That's the underlay. On top of that, you have the virtualization functions that needs to be also interoperable in terms of the amount of VNFs that will be installed, and the interoperability between the different VNFs and the data flows and the service function chaining between the VNFs. That's another issue of interoperability that needs to be addressed. And all of this as a package needs to be also interoperable with different types of orchestrations, with different types of interfaces of the orchestrations. It can be a domain orchestration, or it can be a multi-vendor orchestration, and all of those as a different aspects of interoperability. So there are issues. All of these issues are being addressed by the UCPE vendors. And when you develop the right corrective middleware software that deals with the underlay of the networking and deals on top of that with the virtualization and allow different types of VNFs from, as we have discussed about networking, security, and IT, that allow a smooth migration with a smart functionality of SFCs, the service function chaining among them, with the performance monitoring towards the WAN and towards the different VNFs, and to be interoperable with any types of orchestration. That's I would say, that's the trustable vendor that you can rely on that will provide you the right UCP architecture.
So you're saying, just to take on that for a second, are you saying it's being addressed by the vendors without the need for standardization, or you're saying the vendors are?
I think at the end of the day, there are standardization that needs to be followed. There are the standardizations of the interfaces that to be integrated with the different types of orchestrations. There are standardizations in order to integrate smoothly different types of VNFs, and there is standardization in terms of the networking that allow to have a connectivity.
All right, I'll let Aloke comment, and maybe I'll give John the last word. But
so my take is, I think this is an area that is underserved right now by the standards bodies. I think this is a perfect area for MEF to step in and help in the standardization of how a UCP would actually work. Right now, going back to Saf's original comment, I don't believe, but I don't believe that the UCP should be as expensive as possible. My take is that it should be standardized, how the VNFs communicate. And it's just not about the VNFs, right? Today, should you put everything as containers, or do you put in as VNFs? And do you work on, how do you simplify it and minimize the footprint of the network functions? And it can be network functions, can be IT functions, whatever you want to put it on there. You want to be able to put in functions out there that will actually perform certain capabilities. I believe there's a lot of opportunity in standardizing how they interface with each other, how they interface with the hardware itself, with the CPE itself, how they interface with the external world, including the controllers and the orchestrators that need to talk to it, to make it truly viable as a commercial environment. And going back to my original point about Mohammed bin Tughlaq, once we have that resolved, that's when we would say, yes, the currency is ready to actually be followed, right? And we can get a paper currency.
But I'll let John have the last word and weigh in on who's right.
Go back to the key point of the separation of the software operating system from the hardware, and really focus on the software as a common element, and possibly MEF could help with common APIs, I think is suggested in interfacing with the Mano orchestration platforms and management of the devices and getting a common operating environment for VNFs, and then let the hardware competition ensue where I think innovation and cost reductions will occur naturally with the marketplace, and just allow the hardware vendors to innovate there and not focus on the common hardware, but really focus on the software. Getting that common software for that environment, I think, is key for the success of that UCPE.
All right, and you just wound out the clock exactly.
I couldn't agree more.
Well timed. All right, well, I want to thank our panelists. It was a great discussion. I learned quite a bit. Hopefully you did well. So please help me thank them.